Okay, we are live. All right, I'm back with Counselor Jeff McLaren, and we're going to talk about The Agony of Eros by Byung-Chul Han. We did this live in group at Philosophy Club a couple years ago, but I missed most of it, so this will be a good one to catch up on.
Great, yes. So this is the book, and it's very, very thin, but it is dense. I've had to read this, and I like the fact that it's dense, that it's easy to read over and over again because if it had been a lot longer, I don't know if I would have put in as much time, but I think I read it maybe at least 10 times and read sections of it over and over again, trying to figure out what he means. Because this guy is quite deep, and he doesn't put in any words that are superfluous. I mean, it's as short as it could possibly get. Every single word it counts, and I think it's part of his education. So he's a Korean, South Korean, born in 1959, but he lives and teaches in Germany, and he originally wrote the book in German. And from my reading of other German philosophers, they tend to write very long sentences with lots and lots and lots of clauses. So I think it may have rubbed off on him. But this is an English translation that was published in 2017. So we're on the cutting edge of contemporary philosophy.
That reminds me of Marx, reading Marx. So many clauses. You get lost in the sentences trying to figure out what the hell he's talking about.
Yeah, but it certainly makes for tight and efficient reading. Like, I mean, really, there's only 52 pages on this book. But we spent 4 sessions on this, and through video link, we're going to do about 2 sessions of this. So the agony of Eros, he's talking about the threats to love in the modern world. In particular, everything here we're going to be talking about is unique to the modern world. So at one point, he's going to talk about depression. He's talking about the unique depression that we have as a result of being in the modern world. So depression has been around for a long time, but he's going to talk not about what may have happened in ancient history and that kind of stuff. He's talking about a type of depression that was created in the modern world. And the love that people have experienced over history has changed in the modern world. And the modern world is, in a sense, a threat to real love. And yeah, he starts off by taking for granted that true love is under threat. And many people have said this to some degree or another. And he lists the usual suspects. So one, the ideal of endless freedom of choice. So hookup culture, he's sort of dissing right there.
Tinder.
Yes, the actual overabundance of options. So not only is we seem to have we have much more freedom than we may have had in the past. There seems to be also an overabundance of options. Additionally, he claims that it's also the compulsion for perfection, as described by popular media. He has a real issue with Hollywood in the sense that Hollywood creates an image for us, and nobody ever really lives up to that image. And so we are all offered something that we can't have, but we keep searching for it. And this is very conducive to selling movies and selling merchandise, which is why capitalism loves it. But again, it's a threat to love. And many people have already talked about this. This is nothing new at this point. He's just basically pointing out what other people have said to this point. He makes a quote. In a world of unlimited possibilities, love itself represents an impossibility. And it's important to dwell on that for a second. In a world of unlimited possibilities, love itself is an impossibility. And we're going to get much deeper into that as we go along. But the point is that unlimitedness and this option for an incredible number of choices or unlimited possibilities distracts you from true love. And he gets into that later. We'll get into that later. But he further goes on to say that passion, too, is said to be growing cold. And to be clear on what passion means for him, passion and action are related. Action, you are acting in a way that is premeditated. Passion, you just sort of let yourself go. And in the same way, act. So passion, action, act, passive, patient, actor. There's a connection in those words, and they're sort of opposites. So one acts, you're fulfilling a role. When you're a patient, such as a doctor's patient, the doctor is doing something to you. Does that make sense? When you're active, you're not passive. There's a connection there altogether, right? And passion for him and for most philosophers is the idea that you sort of just let yourself go. And one of the ways that we do that in our modern world is with alcohol. It releases inhibitions, and you just go. It just sort of happens, kind of stuff. That's what he's referring to as passion. And it's sort of grown old in our world today. For example, the idea that you get too passionate about something is a misnomer. It's sort of a misuse of the word. That's because you're acting on something, but you're not passive. And that's what he's talking about here, the passion of being able to just release and let go. Anyway, that's growing cold. And so he also talks about he starts off by talking about some of the usual suspects that are the reasons for this that are given by many of the experts. And one of them includes the rationalization of love. Rationalization here meaning making something rational. I love her because A, B, C, D, E, F, G. I don't love her.
Pros and cons lists.
Yes, exactly. Those things are destructive to love in the true sense of the word. They are helpful for identifying products to consume, but love in itself, and we're going to see why in about 2 minutes, why he says this, or we'll see the start of the hint to why he says this. The second thing that most people talk about it is the expanding technologies of choice. Here we're talking about apps and dating apps and matchmaking agencies and all that kind of stuff. So for Han, these explanations are more like symptoms and examples of a deeper fundamental crisis of love. And what causes these symptoms, what hides behind these, what he calls simple answers, is the erosion and the disappearance of the other. And other here is capitalized. This is a big theme throughout the book, the disappearance and or erosion of the other. And the other here means someone else, the love object. This erosion is occurring, and here's a quote from the book, this erosion is occurring in all spheres of life. Its corollary is the mounting narcissification of the self. And we'll get into that in a sec, the narcissification of the self. In fact, the vanishing of the other is a dramatic process, even though faithfully enough, it largely escapes unnoticed. So narcissification of the self is another theme in the disappearance of the other. Narcissism is the excessive love of one's self-image, which is different from excessive love of oneself and even love of itself. Now, everybody agrees that you sort of have to love your image a little bit, but what we're talking about, or what he's talking about here, is an excessive love of our self-image. When we look at that, or when we look for our self-image in the other, we are destroying the other. We're creating a fantasy that doesn't really exist. And it's also a type of violence that he says our modern world encourages us. It's sort of almost
for ourselves in the other?
Yes, exactly. And in so doing, we feel a certain amount of comfortableness, but we're destroying the other. And any difference or otherness of the other, the authenticity of the other.
So is he saying that there's something in modernity that makes us want to turn the other into us?
Yes, and we're going to get into that. It's not only modernity, it's capitalism in particular, as well as modernity. We'll talk about that as well. Science in general as well tends to do that. Technology in many ways. So it's he's talking about a unique time period in history. This love has been around forever. We humans have felt it since prehistoric times, and there's always been threats, war, famine, all that kind of stuff, jealousies, envy, and that kind of stuff. But in the modern world, there's something new. There's more threats to love, and the result is that fewer and fewer people are finding it, let alone living it or recognizing it even. It's scary. It's a catastrophe. He's going to use that word to describe it shortly, and we'll see why society hates love. because it's dangerous. So, but before we can get into all of that, he has to develop some concepts. He has a very specialized vocabulary here. And the first of these interesting concepts that he describes is the repetitiveness of what we know and are comfortable with. And he refers to this as the inferno of the same. We live in a world, a narcissistic world, that requires this inferno of the same. So to get an idea of it, have you ever watched television and seen that, you know, you have 100+ channels and there's nothing on?
Yeah, I've been there.
That's an example of the of this inferno of the same. If you've ever been on dating apps and everybody's the same, you're witnessing the inferno of the same. It's this movement of everything into something that is comfortable, safe, feels good, familiar, and that's exactly not the other. And so the inferno of the same is a threat to love for several reasons. Among them is the fact that your love object, or your significant other, is another person, quite literally, and that otherness of that person is not you. That's part of what makes her attractive. Mm-hmm. But when you start to reduce that person into the same, with just like different I guess degrees of qualitative differences, you're essentially making everybody the same. So you reduce everybody. They have a nose, they have eyes, they have mouth, they have 2 ears. They're all the same. And the only thing that's different between them, if that's what you're looking for, you're missing out on the otherness of this person. Those are inessential qualities to a great extent. But the fact that they're made essential, partly through Hollywood imagization of what's considered attractive and what's not, you're missing out on what the other is. And this is an example of how mass media and social conditioning are already distracting you by creating ideals of beauty, which any real person will never actually match up to. So the inferno of the same, anything that comes towards the inferno of the same. I should also point out, he's talking about extremes here. There's nothing wrong with sameness in and of itself. In our modern world, we've gone so far in the wrong direction, or well, not in the wrong direction, in a particular direction, that we are incredibly unbalanced. And what he wants to do is bring us back into a more balanced world. So it's okay to have similar qualities with other people, but he says that the inferno of the same is an extreme case, and we think of it as normal, where in fact it has not been normal in the history of the world. Capitalism benefits from this, us thinking it's normal.
From the sameness.
Yes, the sameness, and thinking that that's normal, and the result is a lack of true love in the world. And we're going to get closer into understanding what that is. So again, the inferno of the same is what the world aspires to be today: comfortable, safe, familiar, and just accepted. Because if you're just accepting it, then you're not interested in changing it. And the only way that this can actually happen is through the narcissification of the self, in which all you're doing is looking for yourself in the other. And TV and media, including social media, are moving us in that direction because it facilitates it, it makes it easier. So his claim is that everything in our society is devolving. He uses devolving, not because it's a bad thing to go backwards, but because we've gone to such an extreme in one direction that we sort of need to go backwards to a more balanced world. So everything is devolving into the inferno of the same. And this does not mean that the world is the same, only that we desire and are programmed to prefer and seek the same over and over again. So we watch the same sitcoms over and over again, and they're all similar. They're like slightly different characters, like minor nuanceical differences, but we tend to watch them, and they're fun. He doesn't diss the fact that they are fun. It's just that they are in fact distracting us from, I guess, in a sense, what's more important if you're interested in love. Then Okay, so do we got the same? We got any questions on the Inferno of the same?
Um, Something you just said, like 3 sentences back, um, but I can't remember.
Our society is devolving into the Inferno of the same.
Well, okay, so you mentioned a second ago actually that what we need to do is return to something.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So capitalism, in a sense, is destroying this by taking us to extremes of things that could be normally good.
Yeah. Okay.
So, in the same sense that fat is good for you, you need it to survive. Too much is not so good for you, right?
Yeah.
In that sense, but it's delicious. So you eat a lot. Throw in salt and sugar and all that kind of stuff. These things are all absolutely necessary for life. But in our world, from a health perspective, we have gone from a world of scarcity to a world of surplus, and the result, new diseases are coming up. In that sense, in this analogy, what we need to do is reduce our salt intake. We need to reduce our sugar intake and our fat intake because we have so much of it.
Yeah.
Not because we don't need them. We absolutely need them. They're part of a healthy diet. Just that in our world, we've gone too far in an extreme. So in this notion of health, fat, sugar, salt, and all that stuff, we've got too much of it. In the same way, sameness is important to have in our world. Comfortableness, commonalities, and that kind of stuff. But we've gone too far to the point where it's unhealthy for love. And that's his main claim. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, so in that sense, we have to go back, but it's not back to prehistoric times or anything like that. It's back to a realization of where the balance should be, a proper healthy amount of sameness, which we have way too much of, and the world is moving us in that direction.
So, okay, well then wouldn't that be moving forward and not back?
It could be moving forward in the same way that if moving forward means moving from a world in which we have diseases caused by excess to a world where we better handle that. So if we go back to the health analogy, it's very difficult to convince manufacturers of potato chips and stuff like that to become more healthy by reducing the salt and the sugar and the fat in there, because they know that chemically they're designed to be as tasty as possible for our bodies that lived in a time of scarcity. And we haven't evolved to the point where we don't like it as much anymore because it's so common, right? I mean, evolution in the sense of the survival of the fittest doesn't work in the same way when you live in a civilized society. So in that sense, we have to move forward by limiting some of the excesses of the recent past.
Or we need to change the system that doesn't incentivize all those bad things.
That's another way to do it, yes. So in that sense, you could call it moving forward. He does talk about that briefly towards the end, but his main goal here is just to make us aware of the imbalances in our life that we think are in fact normal, because as we'll see later, they cause depression, they cause burnout, and they destroy love in our life.
Is he a postmodernist?
I would say yes.
They're great at pointing out things, but what are the solutions? Come on. Anyway, go ahead.
Okay. So the next term that he wants us to learn is the term atopia. Not utopia, which he also uses, but atopia. So the author uses the term atopia as an inhospitable place that cannot be turned into a dwelling place, and often links it with the other, as in he uses the term the atopic other to describe an other, a person, another, that cannot be familiarized or with which one cannot be made comfortable in a familiar, knowable way. This is actually how you preserve the otherness in the other. You never assume that you're going to make somebody familiar. You can get closer, you can become more knowledgeable about each other. You can actually become, in a sense, familiar, but not completely familiar. As we'll see shortly, there's boundaries that are helpful for that.
So you have to be aware of that.
It's important if you want true love, instead of destroying true love, which is what most of us tend to do. Words used to compare the unknown to the known and or explain the unknown as a case of the known make us comfortable. Okay? So if we say, That lightning up there is two gods fighting, and you don't have to worry about it, the lightning and the thunder. If that's your first explanation, you're probably going to like it, and because it makes you feel better. You're not involved, you're not in real serious danger. And it's very difficult to get out of that. And he recognizes that the first thing that makes us feel comfortable will be what we want to believe. And so we impose a lot of fantasy on our other. But what this creates, of course, is violence. So we have to understand that we will never, ever know somebody fully. We can't know it. I mean, it's a romantic ideal that you'll understand how somebody ticks, but that's a myth that is hurtful. Romanticism is a myth entirely, and it's very hurtful. It might be fun to play out, right? Like flowers and talking about waterfalls and all that kind of stuff, and sitting in a park, that kind of stuff. That romantic part. That's not the bad thing. It's the philosophy behind it that suggests we can know somebody intimately through and through. We can have a certain degree of intimacy, but the fact is that you can never really know somebody in their entirety. I mean, you barely know yourself, let alone anybody else. So that's a romantic notion that he wants to dissuade us of. Not to ruin it, because it's fun to play it at times, but to make us aware that you're not going to get there.
So accepting
it's not
the
supposed to
mystery
be
and the unknowableness is the path to healthy relationships.
It's much healthier than the romantic notions that, oh, I know her, she would never do that kind of stuff.
Okay.
So the atopic other is something that cannot be spoken of or about with any satisfaction or accuracy, and therefore maintains its otherness in spite of language's taming and explanatory attempts. So when I say she's beautiful, she is. There's no doubt. But so are a lot of other people. And by using that one word to describe her and these others, you're sort of reducing them to the same. Here are beautiful people, and you can see them on like Love Island or something. They're always beautiful. But they're also they're very similar, right? That when speaking of the other, it's very easy in our language and in our world to fall into making comparisons and leveling it out. And that sort of destroys the other. And it's okay to use that in a sort of romantic thing. He doesn't want you to say stop being romantic in a sense. He wants you to point out that it's very difficult. You can't ever fully explain the other. You can't know the other. You can't to some degree. You just can't ever think that you know them in their entirety. And to do that, to say, oh, so-and-so, whatever profession they are, let's say occupational therapist, I know everything about them. No, it's never the case. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Right.
So when you are trying to since we're trying to destroy the other in others, because this is the fundamental, from his perspective, the fundamental problem or threat to love, what we're doing is we're professionalizing other people. And in so doing, we're destroying all the erotic. We're destroying love, in fact. One of the things he points out is professionalism is absolutely not erotic in any way. It may be sexual, like you can hire a sex worker. Okay, I guess I should point out what eroticism is here, okay? Eroticism is a unique thing to humanity. Animals have sexuality, they mate and that kind of stuff, but only humans have taken something extra. And what that extra is, according to most postmodernists, and he's not unique here, is the notion that you take a useful or a purpose and you turn it into a thing for itself. So to eroticize something is to take it away from its purposeful action and enjoy it just for itself. I'll give you an example. Eating. Eating is, there's two drives involved here. One, you want to satiate yourself, and one, you want to actually go through the motions of chewing it and swallowing it. It's easy to imagine. You can separate those. Imagine separating those two. You could be fed intravenously. Is that
Yes.
satisfying?
Yes. Yeah, I see.
It's
Yep.
not. At the same time, you can see when you say you give a pacifier to a baby that's crying, they start sucking on it. They're not gaining any nutrition, but the sucking motion that they do, it's like a pre-programmed built-in something. It's required for survival. They have to learn to breastfeed, and we take advantage of that drive to do that. You stick a pacifier in the kid, they stop crying, and they suck on it. They're enjoying the the sensation, the action of it, without the purpose of eating. Whenever we do something like that, you have your significant other's hand and you touch them like this. You're not gaining information. It's not for any useful purpose. It's for itself. Does that make sense? That
Yeah.
becomes eroticized. When you look at somebody, not for information, but just to appreciate, that is an erotic action. Animals don't do this. They're looking for data. They're looking for information. Is this dangerous? Is this not? And we do that all the time too. But when we do things for a purpose, for a useful thing, when it's utilitarian in nature, it's not erotic. When we stop doing it for a utilitarian nature and do it for it itself, for just doing the action by in and of itself, that's when it becomes erotic. And you can almost see this when you look at a girl or a girl looks at you longer than you expect. Suddenly, it's not. You realize, okay, there's something else is going on here. She's not looking so much for information. She's eroticizing you, and sometimes people. And when the wrong person does it, it's very uncomfortable.
Yep.
Right? That's what humans do. That's eroticization, and by making things as useful as possible, we're in fact destroying the opportunity to eroticize anything, because literally anything can be eroticized. And this is different from sexuality. Sexuality, of course, deals with the sexual organs or erogenous zones. You mix the two of them and you've got a pretty potent love life. But if you don't, you're missing out on the otherness of the other. Does that make sense? So eroticizing the other, treating them as an end in themselves, as opposed to a tool, or as opposed to something for your personal gratification, as something to be consumed, is keeping the other. And this is why eroticism is very important for maintaining the other, but it's being systematically destroyed in our society because we're always looking for a useful purpose. And we're going to get into this later with the notion of performance. And we live in a performative society, and that's also somewhat distasteful to a more true love. Oh, and I should also point out the word infatuation, which is dismissed. It's dismissed as like, puppy love or, not a true love or anything like that. He's going to argue, no, that is the highest love that most of us can ever experience, is at the infatuation stage. And the ideal is when the two people are infatuated with each other. The love that comes later is the result of society having crushed the infatuation.
So then, could you say that
We're going to get into this.
Romeo and Romeo and Juliet never left the infatuation stage and ended up getting crushed by society?
Absolutely, yes. Yes, and in fact, we're going to talk about a Libin's death. I forget. I'll get to it eventually. The idea of a love death, where you would rather die than live without your beloved. Like that's about as true love as you can get, right? When there's nothing left. Society would want you to never feel that way, because feeling that way is dangerous for society. I mean, a person who is in infatuation, or like in the Romeo and Juliet stage, where they'd rather die than not live with each other, is very harmful for society. I mean, in that infatuation stage, you are willing to drop everything for the other, including all your responsibilities to society, family, friends, job, and that would be a very destabilizing thing. So you can see why society wants to kill this, even if it's not a conscious decision out there to say, okay, we're going to try and destroy love as much as possible. They diminish it. They call it puppy love. They call it infatuation. Oh, it's so sweet. I hope you grow up, kind of stuff. And remember what you're supposed to be doing in life, kind of stuff. That is a destruction of true love.
What about unrequited infatuation?
Yeah, that he doesn't get so much into that because that's a different issue in the sense that it's not love between two people.
But it
It's
still is a
it's
love.
it's a fantasy.
Okay.
So yeah, we're talking about a couple, and it could be a gay couple, it could be any kind of couple that you want. The two of them are getting together, and they are in love, and there's a stage in which they're willing to do anything for the other. That's where they're infatuated. If one is infatuated and the other is not, you've got a pretty abusive relationship. So it's important that they both be. If they never get to that, I mean, it's possible to have a relationship, but it's not true love. Does that make sense? It's not like Romeo and Juliet, Bonnie and Clyde, or Tristan and Isolde. Um, those are the ideals that are being destroyed in our world. It's very difficult to have them, and everything fights against them. So when you feel that passion, when you feel that you're willing to do pretty much anything for this other person, society tries to destroy it, and it does it in so many different ways. And we're talking about it. The Inferno of the same, the Atopia of the other is like, what? Strange, you don't want to know, or you can't know about the other. That kind of stuff is, and we're going to go through a more extensive list as we go through this. Any questions on that?
Nope.
Okay, so the next point that he wants to bring up is that there is a good negativity in the atopic otherness that is different from difference. Okay, this is going to sound weird at first. First of all, good negativity. Negativity and positivity. For him, we live in a hyper-positive world. And there's a lot of other philosophers who talk this way. The idea is that we've eliminated negativity, and negativity can be a very good thing. So as an example of good negativity, imagine kissing a girl with your eyes open versus your eyes closed. Have we discussed this before? I think we did, probably in the group. The point is, with your eyes open, it's weird. It's creepy. You close your eyes, it becomes romantic. Why? Because you're focusing in on the sensation. You're closing off a form of input, your eyes, and concentrating on the feeling that goes with it. That's a certain negativity there. You're blocking out potential information, and you're, in a sense, eroticizing it by closing off a useful aspect. Does that make sense?
I had an ex-girlfriend be upset with me because I didn't always close my eyes.
Yeah, and rightfully so. Close your eyes next time.
She thought I was crazy. I was like, why? What does it matter?
Yeah, it was probably pretty creepy too.
What's that?
It was probably pretty creepy too.
What? Yeah, I don't know. What's the difference?
Well, what's the difference is that you're not eroticizing, right?
Okay, maybe, yeah. Maybe I wasn't.
Anyway, so the point is, okay, so negativity for him is something that we are missing in our society to a degree that makes it bad and is in fact destroying love. The opposite, we have too much positivity. That's a power play when you add things to relationships, but we'll get closer into that as we go on. So where difference is often thought of as the list of variations in attributes or a list of non-common attributes and things compared, the negativity of the atopic other refers to what is unknowable or unclassifiable about the other. Okay? So difference in this sense is a positive in two senses. That is, in adding information and a good thing, right? Second, difference, subtle differences. This person's better here, this person's better there. You're rationalizing the differences. Difference makes the Inferno of the same fascinating. So you're looking at two things that are relatively unimportant, say nose sizes or some other part of the body's size. And you're comparing two minuscule differences. You're missing out on the true otherness of the other person because you're comparing and making slight differences in things that are common between the two of them. I should point out, commonality is the lowest level of eroticism, or not eroticism, is the lowest level of connection between somebody. So if I were to say, do you like Big Bang Theory? I like Big Bang Theory. I like money. I like time. I like to have free time. I like to travel. Oh, you do too? We have so much in common. Let's get married. that's a lot of what we see in the world today. We're looking for commonalities with people. Why? Because we're narcissists and we're looking for other people who are narcissistic just like us and reflect us back to us. This is a problem for the other. And why? Commonality, it's necessary. Don't get me wrong. Again, he says we've gone too far in the direction of commonality. We certainly need some commonality with our significant other. But what he's suggesting is that we look far too much for commonality and are destroying the otherness of our other in that quest. So if you do happen to like the Big Bang and like to travel and like to have free time, that's great. But that's not something to build a lasting loving relationship on. You have to be able to accept differences as well. And I mean, it might be even a start. I mean, he's not going to criticize that. But if that's all you're looking for is for someone who's exactly like you don't really need them. You've got yourself, right? You've got yourself in spades. Why do you need somebody else who's exactly like you?
There's a show on Netflix about matchmaking for autistic adults. So they're teaching autistic people how to like go on dates. So they'll do like blind dates or whatever, and so they just get them to practice like talking about common interests and finding out common interests, and it's so surface level, and you can understand why like they have so much trouble playing by our rational based rules of connection, and it doesn't work for them.
It probably will in a few years. The way that we're going, everything is going to be going towards the same. But if his book has more traction and actually makes people aware of this, no, it's not. Commonality is the lowest level of connection.
Right. Well, they're doing these,
and it's the lowest level of passion too. Well, it doesn't help us either. I mean, it doesn't help anybody to say, so let's see, what do we like together? So you go on a dating app and the first thing that they're asking for, and they do to match you up is, oh, both of you like kite surfing, or both of you like stand-up comedy, or both of you like reading, or both of you like soccer, or both of you like hiking. This is a connection made in heaven, isn't it? That's part of the technologies of choice, and that's what they do. And there's this common assumption that the more commonality, the more things you have in common, the better match you will be. And what he's saying is, no, that just makes you both more narcissistic. Right?
Right.
If you all have the same, if you're attracted, and that's all, to only commonalities, and we're talking an extreme case, you are an extreme narcissist. So again, he doesn't want to go to an extreme. He just wants to say that we have already gone to an extreme and we need to get away from that extreme. So we are all narcissists, and it's not necessarily a bad thing, but we're all sick of it and not knowing why we're sick of it. And the evidence is in the number of unfulfilled relationships out there, unfulfilled and unfulfilling relationships out there that romanticism teaches us should be fulfilling. And what he's saying is that, yes, they can be fulfilling. It's but you've destroyed the other in them. And because you've destroyed the other, you're never going to be fulfilled. Because, well, you could be fulfilled at the very lowest level.
Right. You're putting an artificial limit on what that relationship can be.
Precisely, yeah.
Or how deep you can love.
Yes.
Well, I would never date someone like myself, so I think that's a good sign.
That's probably a pretty good sign. That's probably a good sign, yes. And if they were, I mean, they'd be easy to find because they're all the same. Anyway, so negativity, unfortunately, is disappearing, he says, in our world today. It's what society seeks to destroy by finding and cataloging differences, by comparing to the known, by flattening to the same, by consumption. And everything is being directed at consumption. And that's including sexuality and sex. And we're going to get into that, not today, but the next time around. The atopic other is precisely not consumable, not the same, not known, not comprehensible or catalogable. But you can detect it right away. It comes to you like a catastrophe. It comes to you like a cataclysm, and that's a good thing in the sense that it usually has a bad connotation, but it totally unbalances you. And if you've ever felt like love at first sight, everything else loses its value in a sense compared to the significant other. that's dangerous for society, but it's a wonderful feeling. And that's what true love is. And the society's trying to stop it. So part of what this book is designed to do is like, first of be aware of it when you see it. Don't try and kill it, right? Because society's going to do a pretty good job of that. Because he believes that you can maintain that infatuation level for like 60, 70 years of marriage. That's
radical.
That's kind of the goal of this book.
Revolutionary.
Yeah, it's quite radical. It's like, yeah, the notion that, oh, you're past the honeymoon phase. Oh, that's for him, that's where you've lost. Society has gotten you. You have put other things at a higher place than your love for your significant other.
Well, I mean, it's
and
true.
In that sense, that's
whenever you get into a situation where you feel like that infatuation, however briefly, with someone, it always has this sense of being like rebellious, like this isn't right. You're not supposed to be feeling this
exactly.
Way or doing this.
And that's society's conditioning of you. And he's saying, well, that's in society's best interest, yes, to a certain degree, to have as few people infatuated as possible, or for as short a time as possible. Like, get over it, sow your wild oats, that kind of stuff. You'll get over it, and then come and join the real world. That is destructive of love. Make sense?
Damn this world.
Okay, so where are we going here? Okay, so Eros, and here we're talking about the god, the feeling. Okay, I should also point out, in the ancient world, we look at the ancient gods and goddesses of ancient Greece and Rome and all those places, and we sort of think, oh, isn't that quaint? They had these gods. Too bad. We're either more enlightened now because we have one god, or we are more enlightened because we're atheists and we know that they're just imaginary friends. In the ancient world, according to most people that I've read, people believed this because they couldn't believe anything else. It's not, and they had the evidence of it constantly. If you are in love, you are feeling the power of Venus on you. If you are angry and you are going to war, you're feeling the energy and the power of Ares, the god of war. Dreams, like, where did these come from? Of course, it came from Jove or Jupiter or Zeus or however you want to call them. These things are that notion that the evidence of our lives, of our senses, of our experience can be personified is why he's using the word Eros here. And we're talking about the god Eros. And he points out at one point that there are actually two gods there of Eros. One was the primordial god from which all things came out of, and the other one was the Cupid kind of thing, that the son of Venus. He likes the first one better, the primordial one. Anyway, but the point is, Eros is all powerful, all right? Cupid is not. The later incarnations are not. Eros creates the world. When you're in love, the world changes. I mean, it's like either blinkers come on or blinkers come off. Things are just revalued in a way that nothing else can do. And so that's why he prefers Eros as the world creator kind of thing. So Eros concerns the other. And here again, he uses the term Eros as the god, but it's what we feel, it's what we are. It's in that notion that you can't be other than that. Does that make sense? So it's not like he's being religious or anything. It's the real sensation of what happens in our body. We have like 4 chemicals in our brain that secrete every time we get close to somebody, have sex, cuddle, or feel pleasure. That is the chemical aspect of Eros. The feeling, the meaning, the time spent with somebody, the memories created, that is Eros, okay? The world that we envision and create, that is Eros. So Eros concerns the other. In the Inferno of the Same, erotic experience does not exist. Why? Because it's all the same, right? And it's for a purpose, to gratify the self-image, our narcissism, and that because it has that purpose, it's not erotic. And so the more of the Inferno of the Same, the less eroticism there is. And in fact, There isn't any, according to him. So erotic experience presumes the asymmetry and exteriority of the other. The other is out there. It's not you. There is a very clear difference between this person. And this person is so much above you. I mean, you would literally do anything for them. You would rather die than not be with them, that kind of stuff. That's the Romeo and Juliet kind of stuff. All right. And that's dangerous to society. So, of course, society wants to fight that. Being atopic, the other makes language indecisive. You can't talk about it. It's there's this romantic notion where there's two lovers, one of them is talking and the other one kisses them to shut them up.
Yeah.
Because you want to express how you really feel. That is the idea behind shut up and just kiss me.
Yeah.
It's real there. As a theorist, I tend to talk too much sometimes about these kind of things. And when that happens, yeah, okay, words just don't cut it anymore. That's love. That's an aspect of love that is still shown as a romantic kind of thing. And it's true. It's actual love. It's love. It's real love there. Talking tends to destroy it. Talking at the wrong moment. There's a Billy Joel song, Leave a Tender Moment Alone, where he talks about, I'm always saying the wrong thing at the wrong time and can't get the girl, right? So his advice is, you got a tender moment, just leave it alone. Don't say anything.
Just stay there.
Yeah, just stay there. So what else does he say here? Okay, when any other enters our perception, and by the way, it could be love at first sight, it could be a growing realization, but there comes a moment when the other appears. Okay, so usually we think of it as love at first sight, but it can grow. I mean, it can grow to that, but there comes a point when suddenly, aha, there it is, or there she is. So when any other enters our perception, the other is unknown, possibly dangerous, possibly lovely, and always immediately of concern. That's the important thing. Immediately, like there's two meanings there. Immediately meaning right away, and without mediation. Immediately meaning without mediation. It's like everything else sort of loses focus and gets sort of dim, and you focus in on that person. Even if they're not there, it's in the mind. It clouds the mind. If you're in love, you usually can't think of anything but the other person, and everything else becomes a distraction. That's what he's talking about there. And the person can be quite dangerous. I mean, there's no doubt that that's also possible. Yeah. It might not be the right person for you, but that's society's ideas of you. He's going to say, and it could be any other. It doesn't have to. Once you have it, that's great, but it could be with pretty much anybody if you're both open to it. If it's unrequited, it's probably not the right one.
Well, does that make sense? What if you're both open to it, but your rational side of you is telling you maybe that's not a good fit or the smartest move?
So from that perspective, your rational side, and he gets into this in the last session, that's the problem with the modern world. We're far too rational, and we haven't got in touch with our feelings. Actually, we'll touch on it today, I think, a little later. The idea of doing something, when somebody says, I'm sorry about this, it's just business, nothing personal, that's a lack of connection to the other. It's a lack of awareness of the other. And it's actually good for business. Because then you can at least, then you can really screw people and make a ton of money on the bottom line, and this is what capitalism wants. So no, he would say that we need more of this to have a better, kinder, gentler world out there. But our society, the way it's structured, doesn't want that, because of course it's dangerous. Hey, I don't want to do my job, this stupid job anymore. I want to be with her. And I'm okay living in a shack instead of having to do this crummy job or whatever it is I'm doing. That is not conducive to society, to our society, our capitalist society. But if you live in a shack with somebody you love and who loves you back, and you can maintain that for 60 years, that's a much better deal. But most of us won't look at it that way. So we look at, the things around us, the tools, the useful things around us that promote our self-image, our ease, our convenience, our image to others, and say that these things are the important things. And he's saying, no, you're missing the whole point. And so it might actually be a better decision. Oh, he says, I would say, okay, he doesn't say it, but I think he would, that choosing love over anything else is the best decision. And if you have to live in a shack because you can't do the job that requires you to give up the love, that's a good decision, and it's a better decision for you and probably for the world, but certainly not for the capitalist system. Does that make sense so far?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so in the other, they're always immediately of concern. The other hits us like a cataclysm, he says. It may be sudden or gradual, but it is always disrupting, even to the point of death. So the stories of Romeo and Juliet and Tristan and Isolde are examples of Lebenstod, or the concept of a love death. When you would rather die than miss out on this person, you're there. I mean, that's at the highest level, and that's the extreme case. Hopefully most of us don't ever have to experience that or fear having to do that. But we have a different problem. Most of us can't even feel love, is what he's saying, because society has already said, no, I'm going to study hard and I'm going to become a doctor. I'm going to become this, that, or the other thing. I'm focused in on the future and I'm giving up present. I'm sacrificing now. And we're going to talk about that in the second session today.
Well, they call that being responsible. It's personal responsibility. Yes,
well, it's a lie. So personal responsibility is love. That? When you claim that personal responsibility, say, is working at a bank foreclosing on people and making life difficult for other people by maximizing profit, they call that responsible. They've got a warped sense of values, and it comes from this capitalist system that we live in that values profit over love, and that's a problem that has that we've been living in for hundreds of years. Almost hundreds of years, since the birth of capitalism, at least, and probably in other times, it was a particular class, usually the ruling class, that would give up love for power. He's saying that's the mistake. That's the irresponsible choice that society says is responsible. Like, why would you give up on love for the sake of money? That's stupid, according to him. And it really is if you've ever been in love. Like, you know that Bon Jovi song, Living on a Prayer, where they're doing everything for love? Having trouble at the docks, labor's on strike or something like that, but they do it for love. That's love. I mean, you don't care about the inconsequentials in life. If your car is, or a scratch, or worrying about a scratch on your car is more important than a scratch on your relationship, a metaphorical scratch on your relationship, you've got a warped sense of values. And he doesn't say it quite in those terms, but he's basically saying that's what's wrong with the world. Our notion of responsibility is just way out of whack.
Well, okay with that? I mean, I can't argue there.
No, geez, you're not arguing at all this time.
I'll get there.
You'll get there, okay.
Once he starts talking about solutions.
Well, you just got to love a little bit more. All right, so in our increasingly narcissistic and unhealthy societies, people increasingly put more value on the love, and he puts in quotes, of their self-image at the expense of love of themselves. So we need both, but he's saying that we love our self-image more than we love ourselves. Right? This is why you want to choose to be a banker with somebody you're unhappy with, because it's a prestigious self-image perspective, but it may leave you quite empty inside. Does that make sense?
Well, obviously it would, being a banker.
Okay, yeah, but whatever is the responsible job in the society. Anyway, so yeah, that it comes from an overemphasis of love of self-image over love of oneself. So the subject of self-love draws a negative boundary. Okay, and self-love, by the way, is what's missing in our society. So this is the good thing. The subject of self-love, that is a person who actually loves himself properly, draws a negative boundary between him or herself and the other. Okay? The narcissistic subject, that is the one who has an excessive love of his or her own self-image, never manages to set clear boundaries. The world appears only, and this is his word, adumbrations. which means like shadows or images or not quite clear images of the narcissist's self. So the world appears only as the image of the narcissist's self, no clear boundaries. That's them, that's me.
That's true.
That's
This is Trump
true
in a nutshell.
self-love. It's all of us, actually. Well, he would say it's most of us in a nutshell too. The idea that what's more important is our love of our self-image as opposed to a love of ourselves. If we love ourselves, we put clear boundaries between us and others, and we keep those boundaries because it keeps our otherness. Like we have to maintain our otherness. And it's important to distinguish between inconsequentials and ourselves, by loving ourselves. So this is as far as I'm willing to go, in a sense, to maintain myself. And there's a whole bunch of other things that I'm willing to change because they're inconsequential. But most of us are taught, and society teaches us, that those inconsequentials are us. So I drive an electrical vehicle. That makes me who I am. Well, I would give it up. The point is that you should be willing to give it up for your significant other in a second, in a heartbeat. No choice, no doubt.
You or have for yourself, right? Not just your significant other, or for yourself.
Or for yourself, yes. But presumably you got it for yourself, right? But it's not who you are.
No.
But if you mistake that it is who you are, and it's like the image, I have to appear green to everybody, and I'm going to sacrifice an aspect of my love life with my significant other in order to maintain that image, you're making a mistake. And we do that all the time. We mistake the otherness, which is what's lacking in the world today, or what we can't see, which is trying to be destroyed and destroys love, therefore. And we mix that up with all the things that give us status and material wealth and that kind of stuff. So the person who loves themselves sets up clear boundaries because they love themselves. The person who loves their self-image doesn't set up those clear boundaries because what they're doing is they're actually looking for their self-image reflected in the other. And that's a type of violence. So the narcissistic subject never manages to set clear boundaries. The world appears only as adumbrations of the narcissist's self, which is incapable of recognizing the other in his or her otherness. So the narcissist can't see the other. It's just, okay, I'm going to use the word other as another person, but they see it as exchangeable ones or interchangeable ones. And that's the point. The other is not interchangeable, right? When you've got another who is your significant other, there's nobody you can change for her, right? And if there is, then she's not your other. And that's part of what dating culture, I guess, in our world today is like, okay, well, if she didn't work out, I'll go for somebody else. Oh, she didn't work out, I'll go for somebody else. That interchangeability, that's just looking for a better self-reflection of yourself, of your love of your self-image in the other, because they're replaceable. You prefer this one over that one, big deal. The point that he's trying to make here is that the other is irreplaceable, and insofar as she is irreplaceable, there really is nothing else out there. So how should I say this? So if you have a choice between your significant other and anything else, their significant other comes first because she is your significant other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, right. It's not even an option. You don't even consider the other options.
Precisely, exactly. The other options, they might be dazzling and interesting and all that kind of stuff,
but they're not. They might be better in most ways, or always, but they're not.
Well, from a rational perspective, they're almost always better. From a rational perspective, they're almost always better. That's what makes them unsuitable for love. Because from a rational perspective, we're talking society. This is beneficial for society to get a stable relationship that is that allows you to function and produce and be productive in society, and to have the respect of your peers and of everybody else. Yeah, that in a sense is what we're trying to get from these other people, and everybody wants that because we're sort of taught to consume in that direction. We're just doing what we're supposed to do, but that is antithetical to the otherness of another person, because you're going to be breaking that firm boundary between you and the rest of the world, that part that is of love of yourself. And if you can't even love yourself because you've destroyed that for love of self-image, then there's not much to love there either. And it's a pretty shallow relationship.
Uh,
The Mhm.
does he does he talk about like polyamory and like
No.
no? So he's just talking about purely one-to-one couples because there are other I mean there are other types of relationships and in history specifically, um, you know you wouldn't have just one partner. When we lived in
True.
like a more
So
savage and barbarian tribes.
yes, and most people still don't have just one partner either. The point is that there would be one primary,
I think that
and all
actually
the
did
others could
happen.
fade away.
That actually did happen. You'd have one primary, but you'd still sleep around, um, but with one primary
So that
partner.
that probably happened a lot before the Romantic era. Nowadays, it's considered the ultimate betrayal, right?
Oh yeah.
So romance, yeah. I mean, there's lots of stories of that in ancient Greece where soldiers would come home after a couple of years of campaigning and have a whole bunch of set of new sons, right? And they'd be happily accepted. That's yeah. I mean, the love isn't destroyed by that. In our world, it would appear to be that way because that is part of the trick. Um, if you have one person who is your significant other and you're sleeping around, the romantic ideal is that she's clearly not your significant other because you're sleeping around. But there are situations where that might be possible. The point that he's suggesting is that you have this one other, and they are the center of your life, emotional, spiritual, intellectual, and all that kind of stuff. No, sorry, he's not saying that. That's the romantic notion. But when you feel that infatuation towards somebody else, there's a lot of things that you're willing to change, and that might be giving up a lot of other people. I would suspect that polyandry and cheating may be just incompatible, but I'm not 100% sure how he would take that. I'm grasping at straws here because he doesn't really deal with that. I'm sorry, can't answer that. Okay. Any other questions on that?
Nope.
Okay. So where was I here? So you can't even. So the one who does the fuzzy line can't really love himself and can't set boundaries between the others and doesn't see the others. So the meaning can exist for the narcissistic self only when it somehow catches sight of itself in the reflection of the other. The narcissist needs to see their self in the other to get any affirmation of their self-image. This is why they need it and they love their self-image so much. This is pathological. It's a pathologically distorted need for self-image affirmation, and it explains the prevalence for the desire for the inferno of the same. So the narcissist uses the other and imposes their own self-image on the other. They impose that image so they can get it reflected back because that's where they get their affirmation. Yeah, hey, I'm cool. She thinks so too.
They're looking for
I
validation.
must be cool. Yes, exactly. Now, there's a place for that, but if you have an excessive love of your self-image, that's what you're looking for. And that's what you need. And there's something wrong with you for that because you don't have enough self-love to give it to yourself. Now, everybody needs a little bit of encouragement from everybody else from time to time. But the point that he's trying to make is that the excessive need of that is excessive. Creates this excessive need for affirmation, right? If you loved yourself, you wouldn't need it as much. Now, everybody needs it a little bit. But the fact that we need it so much means that in order to sell a movie or an experience or a chocolate bar or a car, you need to create that image in the objects around you, and this facilitates the selling of things in a particular way. And if everybody has this monoculture of what their image is like, it becomes much easier to mass produce, and therefore society can do that and produce more toys and trinkets for everybody. So everybody now has a smartphone, and they all have these little icons on them, and we can change the icons a little bit between Google and Apple, and we can do all the same things and express our individuality like everybody carrying around this phone. That's the Inferno of the same, how it pushes that on us. We have a tiny little bit of difference, but we all have cell phones. And if we don't, we'll soon have them or we'll soon be dead. That's the reality of how capitalism uses our narcissistic fashion, our narcissistic sense, self-love, to provide us with affirmation. And since we're all becoming more and more the same, we're all going to want more and more of the same things, and they can mass produce it at lower costs.
Right. Oh, right.
So you notice everybody has golf shirts these days, right? How many of us play golf as much as we wear golf shirts?
Not as many.
None of us wear, well, I'm sure most of us do wear more golf shirts than actually play golf. But none of us wear, say, traditional Asian culture dress or Arab culture dress or traditional culture. This style is becoming more common all over the world because it's already being mass produced and it's giving people the image of what they want to look like. That is conducive to affirming themselves.
Being validated.
Yes. And that is beneficial for capitalism. Any questions on that?
Well, yeah, capitalism also kind of, like you were saying, it's a melting pot of identities too. It helps you. It cultivates identities for you to fit into.
Yes.
Or gives you the tools to cultivate an identity out of and like shop around for your identity, like your
shop around within very minor differences. Like I can change the color of this or maybe the number of buttons. I'm not going to wear an Indian hammock or whatever they call those things with the long hemline, I guess you call it. I'm not sure. Why? Because it's not acceptable in our society. And they're going to come more like us. This is part of the Inferno of the same. We all dress the same. And if you put us in a different culture, you'll see just how oddly we do dress. Anyway, so we've already been doing this for over an hour, and I haven't got as far as I even wanted in the first session. So we might have to do 3 or 4 sessions on this book.
Oh.
Okay. So still on the first session, this means like literally the first chapter of this book, or maybe we're getting to the second one now. We might be as far as page 15, I think.
Oh, wow.
Eros and depression are opposites, he says. And again, he's talking about the particular kind of depression that is experienced in the modern world. So depression, I'm sure, is as old as humanity. But there are new kinds of depressions that are being, I guess, in a sense, diagnosed now that may not have existed in earlier times, that are unique in a sense to the late stage capitalism and the society that we live in. And we're going to talk about some of those now. So Eros and depression are opposites. Eros pulls the subject out of itself towards the other. When you love somebody, they become the center and focus of your concerns, not yourself, right? Depression, in contrast, plunges the self into itself, right? We're looking for affirmation. Eros makes possible the experience of the other's otherness, which leads one out of a narcissistic inferno. So love, according to him, is in fact the cure for modern day depression. However, society doesn't want that cure and tries to destroy it anyway, so it doesn't actually seem to work for very long. It always works for a little bit. I mean, when you first fall in love with somebody, it's an amazing experience. You're happy. Nothing can go wrong. Even you get into an accident and trash your car, you're okay with that, right? It's only after you start to lose it that these kind of things really grind you. So and we're talking about Eros. sets in motion freely willed self-renunciation. Okay? Not to the point where you you destroy yourself, but you renounce the things that are not important for your love. It's a singular process of weakening which lays hold of the subject of love. Suddenly, things that you would not have changed under other circumstances, you're willing to change now, which is a pretty powerful force for change. And however, even though you're weak in the sense that you're not going to hold on to these inessentials anymore for the sake of your loved one, you are feeling a feeling of strength and achievement. And this strength and this feeling of achievement in your weakness is the gift of the other. You don't get this from a love of self-image. You get it from your love of self and the recognition of the otherness, the recognition of the other's otherness. If you felt that you loved somebody who was just your narcissistic self-reflection, you wouldn't want to change anything about you because you're getting it reflected back at you. It creates obstinate people.
Right.
And if you can move these people into, their set ways of doing things. They go to work every day, they do their job, they come home, they relax, and they go and buy things. You don't want them to change. That's what the self-image you've created. You've invested time to create the self-image that then you don't want to change because it's your self-image. But what love does, it moves you over to the self-love, discarding or with the willingness to discard the inessentials as you seek closer relations with the beloved. And this, it weakens all the things that you thought you were unchangeable and unnegotiable. And suddenly you are incredibly powerful because you can change so much that you wouldn't have changed others. And this is the gift of the other. It's not something that comes from you. I mean, in a sense, with free will, and most of these people don't really believe in free will in any meaningful sense, but you could, in theory, change any one of these things, but you don't want to because you love your self-image. It's the death of that self-image, the love of self-image, and the replacement with the other that allows great changes, including the stepping out of depression and into joy and happiness.
So if you meet someone that...
if you meet someone... Sorry, go ahead.
If you meet someone that makes you want to change yourself, that's a good sign.
Yes. Now, yes, a few qualifications there. If it makes you want to change yourself into because you want your self-image to be more easily, your love of your self-image to be more easily affirmed, you're doing it for the wrong reasons. And you're not really willing to change. You're sort of just trying to get a better reflection. But yes, generally, that would be an accurate statement. Actually, I shouldn't say generally. In the loving case, it's the case. Probably in our world today, it's rarely the case. Right?
Good.
Okay. So the appearance of the other is always an unexpected cataclysm that decenters the self towards the other. If it were not unexpected or cataclysmic, then it would merely be just more of the same. The same is not cataclysmic. You're seeing it again. Something other, something different is always cataclysmic. Okay? And so he uses that as a good term. So normally we think of a cataclysm as a bad thing. He's telling us that in the case of love, it has to be a cataclysm because in a sense, you're putting your life on the line here. You'd be willing to do that. And that's a pretty terrifying kind of thing. It's a fearful event. The arrival of the other is an awe-inspiring and fearful event. And remember, it can happen gradually, but when it happens, you're fearful, you're in awe. It's a sublime moment. If we are open to it. So we can actually close ourselves off and say, never gonna happen. And most of us are trained to do that. And that's why it's a threat against love. If we are not open to it, then we misinterpret, tame, or ignore it out of our consciousness. like an ostrich in the sand. When we tame it, we say, oh, it's just puppy love, or it's just infatuation, get serious. That kind of stuff. Eros, or erotic desire, conquers this kind of depression. It delivers us from the inferno of the same to the Atopia. Again, this inhospitable place. Atopia is an inhospitable place, which in fact is the utopia, the ideal place of the wholly other. The not holy as in religious, but the entirely other. That was a quote from him. Eros is salvation from the same, or the inferno of the same. It turns what is inhospitable and uninhabitable into a redemptive salvation. In the extreme, and here he says this, in the extreme, Romeo and Juliet were saved from not having to live apart by death. So the disastrous event unfolds as disposition, as annulment, and as a voiding of our own. That is, it can unfold as death. But that's again in the extreme case. And many people don't feel that because the society wouldn't want us to. I mean, it would be pretty bad for society. So, but in less extreme cases, the death that he's talking about is merely a catastrophe for the usual balance of a person, which results in a changed person. I mean, when you're in love, you are a changed person. You see this in another person when they're in love, and they're willing to do things they wouldn't have done otherwise. That's, he believes, is beautiful, and it's what's missing in our world. And when it does appear, the world is trying to crush it and kill it. It's almost like a born-again person. They're almost a little bit annoying if you're with them and they're always talking about this other person.
Right.
But hey, it's good for them, right? And that's part of the reason even our friends can be, that can hurt us in that sense, but probably not meaningfully. It's just they don't understand. So this is what erotic love can do to a person: change their life abruptly, unexpectedly, and he believes permanently, if they are open to the other. And the minimum conditions, this is a quote from him, the minimum conditions for true love is possessing sufficient courage to accept self-negation for the sake of the other. This is difficult and maybe impossible in a world that, as it stands, cares only for agreement, agreeability, and narcissistic gratification. There's nothing wrong with arguing with your significant other, or even being disagreeable. These are parts of life, and we'll get into it at another date. But when you have a certain negativity, it makes this is actually Nietzschean and much older than him. But if you're on a straight and level like this, there's no intensity of emotion or anything. It's a pretty boring life. It's what Nietzsche would call the last man, the ultimate couch potato. When you add something positive, it goes up. But the difference between these two is the important, the sense, the feeling, the what makes life worth living. And in fact, the negativity and the difference when you increase the positive and the negative together, it's a better life worth living, he would say. Nietzsche would say. He's basically saying the same thing. We have moved in a direction where we only want more and more positive, no negative. And that excessive positivity is, from his perspective, a power play. It adds a power dynamic where you're creating a fantasy that you're trying to impose on another, and that's the type of violence. And we all sort of have to do this in a sense, especially in our professional lives. But when it comes to a significant other, you do that, you're destroying the long-term viability of the love in that relationship. Because then you have an inauthentic relationship, or an aspect of the relationship that is inauthentic and not other. It's just a reflection of yourself. And if that's all you're looking for, then hey, welcome to an ideal world. But it's a shallow world. It's a shallow world because you lose the joy of the infatuation. And that, I think, ends the first 15 pages of a 59-page book, or 53-page book.
Holy moly.
And we've been at this for an hour and a half. I think we may have to do this in 4 sessions, if you're okay with that.
Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah, we can do that. Yeah, we're not going to get through another hour and a half here in this session. I got stuff to do, so. Okay, let me just check the chat right now, see if anyone else has any questions. People are enjoying this one though so far.
Oh, I'm glad.
All right. Well, yeah. There's nothing specific. So, all right. Well, thanks, Jeff. 2 weeks from now, 9 o'clock, hopefully.
Sounds good.
We'll do this again. All right. Bye now.
Alrighty.
Thanks for coming over, everybody.
Bye-bye.